This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Shredding guitar as unto the Lord. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert, a special guest this week in studio, and maybe a little bit of a different interview from the type of program that we brought you in months past. Rather than discussing various things happening in the world today, or research into the spirit realm, the supernatural realm. A gentleman who's known to a number of us here in the Ozarks through his presence on social media, a gifted professional musician, a teacher, a researcher, one who's hungry for knowledge, and spent a week with us here in the Ozarks, getting to know us and our friends in and around Skywatch TV. We are honored to bring to the bunker for the first time Kenny Seay. Kenny, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It was really funny. I hadn't really realized how much of an encouragement you've been to everyone. I mean, we see your post and your reactions to our post on social media on a pretty regular basis. But I think the thing that really opened my eyes this week is when our friends Troy Anderson and Colonel David Giammona, co-authors of the new book, The Military Guide to Armageddon, you joined us at the studio, at Skywatch TV's new studio, for a recording of programs that are forthcoming based on that book. And they were both like, "Hey, we know you. You're that guy from Facebook."
I know. I'd read the book and I was excited to be here at the same time, get to see them on Skywatch. So for them to recognize me was kind of like, wow, I'm just a musician posting my kids on Facebook. But I also do read a lot of Skywatch and a lot of appropriate stuff like that. So, it was
studying under Dr. Michael Heiser. Well, let's get into some background as to why you're here. Professional musician. You had a long career in music. You studied music.
Yep, that's right. I attended Berklee College of Music in Boston, and I've played professionally since I was about 17 years old. Bands, many different bands, metal bands, rock bands, variety bands, corporate. I mean, a little bit of everything. As I get older, I've kind of moved into like the corporate world of weddings and festivals and stuff like that. But that's been half of my job, and the rest has been I've been teaching and cultivating educational stuff for many years now. For people not familiar with the Berklee School of Music, where does that rank and compare? Well, for me, it was I saw, and
I know you're not wanting to toot your own horn here.
No. It's a pretty big deal. I mean, for me getting in there, I didn't have a whole lot of training and background, and I was able to get in there. Not basically because I had a lot of knowledge going in there. It was just because I could play really well. And they're like, "Hey, man, people come here to play like you, so we can teach you all the other stuff." And it was a great experience. But I basically went there because I saw that Steve Vai, a very popular guitar player, that Joe Satriani was his teacher, and then Steve Vai went to Berklee, and that was it for me. I had to go to Berklee.
So that led to, now I presume if you were following Steve Vai back in the day, that your walk was a little different then than it is now?
Oh, yeah. Well,
because for just to give you some comparison, when Joe Horn, who, like you, is a world-class guitarist and musician, told me 5 years ago, that John Schlitt, former lead singer of Petra, was coming out here to do some programs with us.
Right.
And we got to know John and did some interviews with him and really got to like him. I was like, okay, all right, well, if this makes you excited, Joe, that's fine. Then I did some research on him, and I was like, oh, he was the lead singer of Head East. Yeah!
That's right.
So, that was kind of, my late teens, early 20s, that's where I was. So, so I can relate.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it's kind of funny we're talking about Steve Vai, because one of his big things that happened when he was about 86 was he's in a movie called Crossroads that had to do with Robert Johnson and the whole thing.
Right.
He was the Devil's guitar player and stuff. But I was so amazed at what he did with that, and it kind of led me here. And of course, where am I at right now? Crossroads.
The U.S. Geological Survey's designated our little unincorporated area as Crossroads, and not even one word; it's two words.
Crossroads.
Yeah.
Isn't that neat?
So, what then? How did your walk change then over the years after coming out of college? And again, I see a parallel with Sharon's walk. I mean, she accepted Jesus at an early age, but got into a role as a professional vocalist, singing rock and roll. Mm-hmm. You may not know this, but she actually replaced Jinx Dawson, who was the lead singer of the band Coven.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she came out of a band in southern Indiana called Madison Zane. And so when they replaced Jinx Dawson, Nicole Sharon took her place. So,
wow.
Yeah, that was kind of where she was back in the day.
Yeah,
so
rock and roll background.
Wanted to be that rock and roll star, and
Absolutely.
I know her path led her to change direction. How long did it take you, and what was it that got you to start thinking about eternal things?
I spent most of my life playing in bands and having pretty good success with different things, putting some songs on TV shows. Probably my biggest thing, I got involved with a Journey tribute band called Frontiers. The lead singer, Jeremy Hunsicker, was part of Journey for a little while. They brought him in. He wrote some songs with them. It didn't pan out. They got Arnel Pineda, and then he decided to take it, around the country. So I got involved in that and got to play a lot of big places. And the more that the closer I got to that whole thing of like, this is what I'm meant to do. I think I'm going to be this. And it's probably the biggest pinnacle. The point I actually had to look up a little bit of a revelation. It was like, this isn't really what I want anymore. And I was about 40 years old at that time. And I was like, something's calling me. And I realized that I got out of that. And there was a couple of years of where I was moving toward things, and life kind of was pulling for different things. I wasn't completely in the right path at that point, and it took me a while. But then, as time went on, I ended up at a little church called Journey Church in Roanoke, Virginia.
Journey again.
Journey. Yes, trust me. When everybody saw that I went to Journey Church, you're like, wheel in the sky, man, don't stop believing. Every Journey joke there could be.
Yeah.
But I was like, hey, it really... It meant something, so it was really cool when I got there, and it really changed my life, and I got baptized a couple months later. I'd been baptized as a kid, but it was to me, it was a big changing point for me to move, and it kind of set me in the right direction then of what was going on with it. So that was probably about maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
So what kind of foundation did you have as a kid? I mean, church? Or
No, we there was a little Presbyterian church that was down from our house. You could walk to it, and I grew up there, and then, over the years, I ended up in different churches in the Springwood Baptist Church, and so I've also been to another Presbyterian church in Buchanan. So it's kind of like I had a background across many different, denominations, but pretty strong Christian background. Everything was kind of like that. But it got me started, and I think a lot of people thought I was going to do something with it, but I decided I wanted to be a rock star first, and that kind of I went that path for a while.
Yeah. The path then from going to church. I mean, there's quite a distance between getting back into a church on a regular basis and then deciding you're going to sign up for Mike Heiser's online school of theology.
Sure.
and diving into the deep end of the pool.
Right.
What was it that brought you to wanting to start digging into theology and the Bible at that level?
I think at some point when I was traveling a lot, I like to read, and I just began searching for purpose. And I wasn't completely a Christian on point with everything, and I was kind of looking at everything. I was reading New Age and all the different types of thing, and I'd look into Buddhism, and I was reading all the other books. And at some point, it all just eventually came to, I realized that Jesus is the way. That's where it leads to, and that's what it was. And at that point, I started kind of narrow my viewpoint and kind of working toward that. Chuck Missler, I read a lot of Chuck Missler stuff early, and that kind of led me into finding Tom Horn and you and Sharon and all the people at Skywatch. I mean, then Heiser and you name it, all those people just big smorgasbord of great Christian stuff.
Chuck Missler is the gateway for a lot of us. It was his book Alien Encounters with Mark Eastman.
That's a great one.
Because like you, I can tell by your T-shirt there. You can't see it on the audio version here, but he's got a Marvel Comics T-shirt on, and your Beetlejuice T-shirt the other day, and that's my background.
Right.
I had a couple of older cousins who gifted me their Marvel collection. Yeah. I had some early single-digit number editions.
Wow.
Of Spider-Man, X-Men, Mighty Thor. Not realizing what I was consuming at the time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't think anyone did. I didn't, it was just they were superheroes. And then as time goes on, you start to see the correlation between the Titans, and it's a whole lot. Now at this point, you have to, you everything in culture is showing us all these things that now are very relevant in my walk. So
it's really interesting how the heroes that I read as a kid growing up, late 60s through the 70s, my comic book years, have now been kind of turned into a cinematic smoothie by both Marvel and DC.
Yep.
And they've deviated quite a bit from where the current published comic books are. The comics have gone totally woke. But the cinematic universe tracks with a lot of what I was reading in comics as a kid. And again, not realizing Mighty Thor and the heroes of Asgard were really a religion that required some pretty intense commitment back in the days.
Right.
The Norse, the Scandinavians, the Germans who worshipped those gods did some pretty bloody things. But then so did the followers of Greek and the Greek and Roman pantheons, and of course the older Mesopotamian pantheon as well. Now that we've gotten to a certain point in our walk, in our age, we've been given a little bit of wisdom to discern that what we see in these stories. So we were talking about the new Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, and Wonder Woman is straight out of the Greek pantheon.
Right.
But when you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you've got Thanos, the Mad Titan, and his name is just one syllable removed from Thanatos, the fourth rider of the apocalypse, and I don't think that's by coincidence. Thor, of course, and a lot of crossover. I think the first episode of Thor's comic books, which I had, was Thor versus Hercules.
Yeah.
So when you see kids today who are getting caught up in these cinematic extravaganzas, which are highly entertaining, there's no question about that.
Absolutely.
You've got a couple of kids. How do you talk to your kids, or maybe even your students, your music students, about these sorts of things when they bring up films like these in conversation?
I have a couple students that are really into the same type of, they love the superhero movies and Star Wars and different stuff, and we'll always talk about that, and sometimes I'll get into the Christian viewpoint of where these comes from, and most are pretty, receptive to it. They're interested, they're searching, and so I try to have some little discussions with things like that.
Well, that leads us to something I wanted to get into with you, because you and I mean, me not so much lately just because of time constraints, but both of us were into science fiction and to some degree horror, you more so than me,
right.
But just various types of pop culture and the messaging that is pushed out into our society through film, graphic novels, video games.
Absolutely.
Now, especially young men are not reading so much as they are playing video games and getting their the content that you and I absorbed through reading science fiction back in the day. They're now getting through video games that weren't available to us so much as younger people. As a fan of horror films, which is not typically a genre Christians are going to view,
Sure.
Not necessarily something we recommend either.
Right.
But our friend Brian Goodell,
right? It's part of my past. I mean, it's like one of those things I really enjoyed growing up.
And our friend Brian Goodell, who's an award-winning Hollywood screenwriter, argues openly that horror can be used to convey Christian messages because the enemy that we face, the principalities and powers, are really the ones who create that kind of horror.
Yeah.
Let me ask this. How is your perception of films that you watched back in the day just for the scare changed as you have grown in your understanding of this supernatural war we're in?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like definitely I see everything through a biblical lens now as far as Christian viewpoint. And
we can draw you in a little closer to the microphone here. Just pull it closer.
Cool.
There you go.
And so some things I watched as a kid I don't feel is appropriate. There was things I really loved as a kid. Like I liked Phantasm. I thought that was a really great movie with the little silver balls that flew through the air. That movie scared me as a kid. I was 10 years old, and the tall man. All those symbology of the graveyards and all that stuff. Him carrying a casket by himself. If you're a 10-year-old, you're like, that dude is frightening. So that stuff doesn't. There's other things I feel like I've watched over the years that definitely the occultic view of it has changed. Like made me realize that this isn't really a great film or anything like that. Now there is stuff now. I see a trend in Hollywood. Like I thought, like James Wan's The Conjuring had strong religious Christian overtones at the end, where the aspect of it changed from this, the possession and the stuff like that, to where their viewpoint of light and Christian views stepped in at the end. Like it was like, it's gonna win. Like Jesus is gonna win at the end of this whole thing. So
now, The Conjuring, that was the film loosely based on the lives of the Warrens.
The Warrens, yes. Okay. Which I'd studied a lot of their stuff before that came out, so I was really interested in that. I watched so many shows like back in the day. Like when there used to be the Friday the 13th TV series, which was nothing like the movies. It didn't have Jason.
Right.
It had to do with the Curious Goods shop with all the the antiquities were all haunted, and they got sent out everywhere, and then the girl and her cousin were spent picking them back and bringing them back and putting them into keeping them under. So
that was with the Canadian actress Roby and
Roby,
Derek DeLint or whatever is the Dutch actor.
Man, I loved that show. It was a lot of really weird stuff came out of that, but it was I like that one a lot. I just thought that got some great stuff into it. But now it's not, definitely wasn't a Christian viewpoint on stuff, but it did kind of. It was a really interesting show.
One of the shows that Sharon and I watched, and we've talked about from time to time, is the Fox series Millennium that ran from 1997 to 1999.
We have discussed that a little bit this weekend.
Lance Henriksen, who plays a retired FBI profiler by the name of Frank Black, and the theology in it is not sound, but almost nothing that comes out of Hollywood has got sound theology, but it does at least depict the battle between supernatural evil and good. Now, where it falls short is, of course, the idea that we can do things in the natural realm to combat the evil. And, of course, there are things we do in the natural realm to minister to those who are victims of that type of evil. And in the natural realm, we share the hope that we have in Christ. But there were a couple of episodes that spread a little more truth than maybe even the writers intended. Are there some examples of... Or let me phrase it this way. What are some examples of things you've seen that weren't overtly Christian that actually have more of a Christian message than people might think at first look?
I'm trying to think of what shows I've seen some things like that. Or, like I said, the one that really, like I said, The Conjuring 2, all those recently, I was really impressed with the return back to this Christian message at the end of, those were good. TV shows, I'm not really sure which ones I've seen that have really... I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Doctor Who has got some interesting ideas, and where he is essentially, in all but name, the Doctor is described as is essentially an angel.
Right.
It's just that there's no higher power above him.
Right.
The Time Lords sort of run the universe, and then you've got the Daleks sort of representing. Well, the Daleks and the Cybermen and some of the other villains are sort of representing the opposing supernatural evil. But there are some programs out there. We've talked about Altered Carbon, for example, as another example of a science fiction program that we certainly don't recommend parents watch with children because of the nudity, some language, but certainly there's a lot of violence in that program as well. But what it does depict, it's not really gratuitous as much as it depicts the really decadent state of the human soul, or the human spirit, and human soul. And if the restraints are removed, if we were suddenly to achieve the goal of the transhumanists, which is really what a lot of the comics are about. The X-Men. Oh yeah, they're superhuman. That's really what superhumans are. What it's about is transcending the limits of our biology to the point in the transhumanist's mind of being immortal. Right. If we were to achieve that goal one way or another, so that there were no consequences to our actions or no perceived consequences to our actions, then what would limit our behavior? What would prevent us from doing just anything and everything that we felt like doing?
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, who as a kid didn't want to have superpowers, man? Anything. I always gravitated toward Batman too, because I was always like, he didn't have superpowers, and he was kind of, you're like, oh, this is attainable. I could be Batman, except I'm poor. It doesn't really work. It doesn't really work that way.
Utility belts are hard to come by. Yeah,
exactly, man. Yeah, my utility belt from Dollar General was not that good. This thing won't hold me. But I think about even today, knowing what I know as a Christian, I think about the transhumanist movement and people. I mean, who wouldn't want to be? Because people are like, if they don't have if they're not in Christ, then of course they think this world is all there is. Mm-hmm. So they're like, I got to find out a way to live forever here. I'm like, well, guess what? There's. If you're with Jesus, you are going to live forever, and you're going to have almost like these sort of superpowers with your new body, celestial body and stuff. So I tell people all the time, I don't want to I wouldn't want to live here forever in terms of trying to this body's not going to do much. It needs a lot of work. So
what films or what form of entertainment, whether it was a novel or a movie or a television series, really influenced you as a kid, and how did it shape you? I loved comic books when I was a kid. I loved comic books so much, I was worried. I went to a church with a friend one time, and they were talking about the rapture, and it scared me. And I was like, oh, gosh, I hope there's comic books in heaven. And I realized, you're 10 years old, you're like, oh, yeah. And I was like, man, that was my life. And but I really loved I loved the X-Men, and I loved Teen Titans, Justice League. I mean, all those, they all had things into it. It's funny to see it now and realize my thoughts were being formed by these, to see them now, understanding more of the stuff with the Nephilim and the bloodlines and even transhumanism of, people are trying to, they want to acquire that. They want to be that. And I'm like, that's, but I think just a lot of the, the early stuff like that, formed my viewpoint. I mean, even the X-Men, like now in the movies, they change things a little bit toward trying to make the view about it being like they were, what I'm thinking about. They're kind of oppressed, like they were, oh, I'm a mutant, and they're like, oh, we're so sorry, we can't believe that you're a mutant, and it was all these things in the movies that were kind of like, they changed the viewpoint from when it was kid. They were like, there was always this thing of, the mutants had to hide, it couldn't really be out, and that changed over time. But so when you decided to get into teaching, how does your experience then, your education, your comic book education, help you relate with kids? What age groups do you teach?
Well, the youngest I've ever taught was 3.
Wow.
And I consistently teach a lot of 5-year-olds is where it tends to start. I'm very much about bring your kid to me and let's see what they have. Some kids are mature enough to do it, some aren't. You can kind of figure out things with it, but some of my best musicians started at 5 and they're 7 and they're incredible now. So it really depends on the child, but I teach a lot of teenagers. I have adults. I have people that are in pretty big bands that are professionals and stuff. So I teach the whole gambit of ages. I think it's just never too late to learn music. And so, yeah, a little bit of everything.
Well, just like you as a kid or me as a kid thinking, hey, being Spider-Man would be totally awesome because I'm sick of being the one who gets picked on.
Absolutely.
Boy, it would be awesome to, be able to just swing and have these powers where if anybody messed with me,
Absolutely.
I could just, do you see some of that in the kids? I mean, do kids, when they come to you, are there times when you can tell when they're having a rough day and thinking that, gee, it would be great if I could just get away like, the Flash and just run away from it or whatever?
Absolutely. And, kids are really, the fantasy aspect is really great because it does. Sometimes real life is tough. Mm-hmm. And this last year with COVID and schools being out, kids not having a lot of interaction, you had to find a little more things to help them, combat that. So I would take even some kids. We would learn not necessarily what I could consider traditional music, but music from video games they love. I mean, my gosh, I've never played Minecraft, but I can play you all the Minecraft songs. Roblox, And kids are like, why do you have an account? I'm like, because I got to figure out how these songs play. But I have a lot of kids that love the cinematic music too, like the Avengers themes. They're all really great. They're fun to play. So, the kids like to learn those. And I think that it gives them that thing. They're playing a superhero song. It makes them feel empowered, and they love it. It gives them that certain feel when you're playing. So.
One of the funniest things I ever saw was a barbershop quartet, 4 young men who were just 2 or 3 years out of college now, but they've been singing together for a while, and they put together a medley of all of the best Nintendo 64 themes and did it a cappella.
That's awesome.
Which, of course, is the definition of a barbershop quartet. But that is something that bridges, I think, our social differences and cultural differences. Music can bring people together who may not have much else in common. It's kind of a wonder that Sharon and I, because I'm barbershop quartet and she's opera, that's about as far apart as you can get. I had a music teacher in college once who said that barbershop wasn't even a true musical style. It was degenerate form of music. Like, okay, thank you, Dr. Barnea.
Wow.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, but Sharon loves me anyway, so that's fine. How do you approach a student who may be, say, having a difficult time opening up to you and receiving? What do you use? Are there certain styles of music that you find to be more effective in kind of opening that door?
Honestly, I keep being told over and over, you need to be able to duplicate yourself in your teaching. But what I do, I can't seem to duplicate with someone else because over the years of teaching, I try to find out real quickly what they love. There's got to be something they love. So I let each student, when they first meet, when their first lesson, I want them to tell me stuff they love. Because if a kid says, I love Metallica, but I'm going to try to teach him a Johnny Cash song, he's probably not going to want to practice it. Mm-hmm. So I try to find something, and usually they'll leave, even a 30-minute first lesson and stuff, they're going to leave playing something, and and it's always that, you've got that, they're in now. They're like, I'm playing this song I love my whole life. And it can be very simple notes, simple choices, but it's that it gets them in, and then they're like wanting to. They're really in that place when you don't have to ask them. The parents are like, I don't have to ask them to practice. They just practice. So, things have changed. Attention spans have changed. Mm-hmm. Everything with, even social media and even video games, everything's cut, quick. So even thinking about with music, you have to think of ways to make that keep them interested. I mean, we're seeing a lot of stuff now with different social media stuff, but everything is very quick. Twitter, and then it went to TikTok, and TikTok's just like people are just making these little things, but it still goes back to music and dancing and all this stuff. It's these little things that people can do on their own, but yeah, I think the key is just finding what they love, and it can be any style. I don't ever put to it like, it's so amazing. One of the most amazing things is I have young kids that come in and play some games like Fallout, and they love these songs from the 30s and 40s that are in the soundtrack.
Really?
Oh, it's incredible. And they'll come in and be like, the ink spots and stuff like that. Yeah. So, and these are 12-year-olds, and that's what they're listening to. So they'll come in and say it, and I'm like, yeah, let's do this. So, and some of that's very complex music, but that's got them in. So they're learning something that's a little more than some of the what goes for music on the radio today.
Well, Billy Joel said that in talking about rap music, music has 3 elements: melody, rhythm, and lyric. Mm-hmm. and rap only has 2 out of those 3, which tells you what he thought about rap. Now, okay, it's an art form. I'll give it that. It's a legitimate art form to be able to manipulate words in that way. But it is there's a power to music, and not all of it's good.
No.
It has been used and shown that it can be used to induce an altered state of consciousness with a real heavy beat and repetition.
That is right.
But on the other hand, it can also be used to unlock things inside people. They've shown with Alzheimer's patients that it can unlock memories and get neurons connecting, or alternate paths around neurons that have blocked or decayed or whatever occurs during that process. What was it about music that unlocked you as a kid? What was it that made you realize this is what I'm going to do?
Sure. When I was younger, I think I had terrible taste in music when I was a kid. I mean, look, I still have a place for Grease. Man, I love Grease and all that stuff. And people are like, what is this? And Saturday Night Fever. And I loved all that era, man. Disco, man, I was a kid. I loved it, man. The Bee Gees, bring it. But when I was about 13, I had an older brother who died in a car crash. And I inherited his music collection. And that's where it all started for me. It was just like, I got this cassette thing, and it was attached to my brother, and I look at it, and it was like the classics of all time. AC/DC Back in Black, Van Halen 1 through Diver Down, Fair Warning, Def Leppard Pyromania, Genesis Abacab, Toto Ford had Rosanna. I mean, this was like, this was it. It was like, this was the catalog. And me finding it at 13, I just grew to love this, great harmonies, great singing, great guitar players, and it just sunk in, and I was bitten, and I was like, oh, this is so awesome. And I spent a lot of time playing guitar than really caring about school. Hey, it worked out for me, kids. So,
how many instruments do you play?
I think about 15. Guitar is my main instrument. As time went on, I found that I learned to play piano and then bass, vocals, and drums. I did a little bit of that with everything, but then as time went on, people would call up and say, hey, man, can you play ukulele? And I'd go, strings, frets. Yes, I can. And I'd just grab a ukulele and spend a week playing on it, and there you go. And I kind of, after a while, it kind of works for anything. Mandolin, banjo, it's strings and frets, man. So, yeah, I enjoy that, too. And it helps break up the monotony of stuff, too, because every once in a while you can grab another instrument, feel something different that you wouldn't on another. Tunings and string patterns and all that, it's amazing.
The background of science fiction and comic books and so forth, sort of a nerd background, and I proudly claim that as well.
Me too.
Probably not the same motivations or thought patterns, interests as a lot of guys who wind up fronting really big name bands. For example, I wouldn't assume that David Lee Roth was big into Chronicles of Narnia or whatever back in the day. But
can you imagine that? Hey guys, I brought in this song about Aslan. It worked for Led Zeppelin with all the Hobbit, Lord of the Rings references and stuff. You're like, that really worked, but Van Halen, he's like,
I just can't see that.
Come on.
But then, he wound up going back, and they did some interesting things with Jan Van Halen, who was the father of the Van Halen brothers.
That's right. They brought him in playing clarinet.
Big Bad Bill is Sweet William Now.
That's one of my favorite songs on Diver Down. I love that song.
Yeah.
It made, as a matter of fact, I took clarinet.
I heard that a cappella before I ever heard them do it.
Really?
Because, again, it's
from the barbershop.
It's right in the sweet spot for a barbershop quartet.
It is. I actually learned to play clarinet when I was at Berkeley, just because I had to take some other instrumentation, and I was like, I want to learn to play that because that song, I heard it, I was like, oh, it's clarinet, it's kind of cool, had a cool vibe to it, so absolutely.
Yeah, and clearly he had some appreciation for the work of some of the great jazz artists of the 40s and 50s. Yeah, Louis Prima, for example. But your sci-fi nerd back, how did that influence the band? I mean, how did the bands that you put together over the years?
It's really funny because I was a rocker and had the long hair and all this stuff. But I remember a movie that I loved, Buckaroo Banzai.
Yes.
And
what a great cast.
Oh my gosh, that movie was fantastic. As a matter of fact, I know a guy that later on I met years later, and he actually, his band, they called his band Perfect Tommy, and I was like, oh wow, man, that was a cool note to it. But I always thought that was cool that they were scientists and these things, and then they were a rock band. And they did that stuff, and I loved it. But here, I got some funny things is I kept sneaking in my sci-fi fantasy stuff into songs that, we're writing all these different songs and different stuff. And then I convinced the band I was in the early 90s, one of my favorite bands, great brothers, we were called Alchemy. And I convinced them to write a song about the Starship Enterprise. And so we have a song that's basically told kind of in a little setting of where they were bored and we got beamed aboard, and we had some cool little effects from the beaming sounds, and it was basically the chorus was just we're jamming on the Starship Enterprise, and it was just, but a lot of people years later that I didn't know knew who we were. They're like, they'd meet me and go, "Oh, you were in Alchemy, Starship Enterprise," and I realized there was a little bit of a fandom of people that caught on to it and said, "Man, I love that song." So we crossed over, from our rock stuff to little things like that. So I always sneak them in there as much as I can.
I'm going to turn the sound off of my phone here. We're getting alerts about incoming storm system here in the Ozarks. Yeah. You actually had a song that wound up as part of a television series, a science fiction series.
Yep, absolutely. We had a band called 790 Robot Head. And I got
790 Robot Head.
You're one of those names. You hear it. I was watching. It was a movie. It was actually a 4-part movie series called Tales from a Parallel Universe here in the United States, and I remember the first one had Barry Bostwick in it, and hey man, he was in Megaforce. Who doesn't remember that? And Tim Curry and Rutger Hauer. And I was like, these are some of my favorite actors. So this show was kind of quirky and sci-fi and stuff, but it had a robot head named 790, and I was like, I am totally calling my next band that, and I did. And we got the attention of the thing because we were an American band, and the company was based, Salter Street Studios was based out of Germany and Nova Scotia, and they contacted me, and I thought I was getting a big cease and desist and like, you can't use their stuff, and it was the exact opposite. They were like, we love what you're doing, it helps promote our show, let's put some of your music on it. So I went from being a fan of this silly show, and then it was really called Lex, that's what they called it overseas, and then Sci-Fi Channel actually brought it over, and we had a song in the season finale of episode of the second season, 2.20, End of the Universe. You can hear our music being played, disc jockeys floating in the satellite in space, and there's this swarm of robot arms flying in, and you can hear our music. But it was cool to me, man. I was like, how cool is this, man? You're a fan. Next year, hey, it's kind of like this, man. I was a big fan of Skywatch. 2 weeks ago, I go to see, Derek and Sharon at a conference, and 2 weeks later, I'm at their house staying for a week, man. And that's craziness. I'm like, this is like my friends are always like, how do you get these kind of things like that? I'm like, I don't know, man. It's just.
My sister accused me of that once. I was early in my radio career. There were just a series of fortuitous encounters that led to job offers. And she said once, you'd be the kind of guy who get a flat tire, and the guy who stops to pick you up, to help you change the tire would offer you your next job. Well, it turned out that wasn't entirely true, and the career turned out not to be the direction that I was supposed to go. But the same is held true for you. I mean, it clearly, just as with Sharon, a rock and roll stardom was not the path. Yep. And you mentioned it was a point at about age 40.
Yeah.
What was it? A specific event, or was it a series of events, or just a growing realization that this?
I think being out on the road and getting a taste of what that kind of, because even as a tribute band, we were really big in playing a lot of places that national artists played. So I was getting that whole experience with that. And there were some things I saw too that were not very kosher that made me think about things. And as we kept getting higher and higher, more things happened where I felt being separated from people and different stuff. And I could feel, I was like, man, I'm starting to understand why there's so many issues with people having drug problems in this, because they felt alone. You're only on stage for a little bit of time, and you're getting that big adrenaline high, and you come off, and then you're by yourself. sick in your room, riding on a tour bus, whatever you're doing, stuck in a van, anything like that, you're like, it's not real life. It's really difficult to deal with that. For me, it was playing the biggest show of my life and seeing people as far as I could see, and literally it just had a moment where everything stopped for me. It just slowed down. Like I could feel it in my brain. I was going, I've made it. This is what I've been doing my whole life. And I literally felt a little tug in me that said, this isn't what you're supposed to be doing. People are like, was that God talking to you? Well, it was definitely something that I felt. And I literally, at that point, then I walked off, was like, I'm going to have to, this isn't for me. But at the same time, I was going through separation and not seeing my kids. So it was like this whole big thing of, do you want to be a rock star or do you want to be a father? And that was a huge,
mm-hmm.
You realize that's not what's important with it. And as time's gone on now, I keep realizing God keeps putting great opportunities in my way. COVID was terrible in terms of I lost half my income with no shows. I had, we were a big band playing all the great festivals and weddings and corporate parties. Nothing. And I got pretty worried about that. But within 2 months, I was like, and tripled my student base. I went from like 30 students to 60 students. I got 61 students currently in about a 20-person waiting list. And God has prepared me now, because during COVID I had to teach virtually for
mm-hmm.
months. No one could go anywhere and do anything. So I learned to do that, and I think that's an amazing thing, because I'm in a place now where that I can move about anywhere and still teach and not miss my student. I love teaching, so I want to do that. And some job opportunities are popping up in places. Not going to say anything, just
Yeah.
I like this area down here, so. Missouri's pretty cool.
Yeah, a lot of good people around here.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it seems to be a gravitational hub that's pulling people in, and Tom Horn has facilitated a lot of that.
Oh, my gosh. Amazing.
That realization on that stage,
mm-hmm.
There have been like one or two times in my life where I've had something like that, and to me it was sort of like a board to the side of my consciousness.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody hitting me with a 2x4. It's like, hey, dummy, wake up. But other than maybe one other thing or a couple of other things that have happened since then, I can point to and say, I don't have a natural explanation for that happen. What other things in your life can you point to that say, yeah, that was probably a supernatural thing?
I've had a lot of experience, and I'm probably saving that for my own book and subsequent podcast that may be coming soon. But I've had a lot of experiences that I would consider to be supernatural, paranormal things that as a kid I thought of them differently than I do now.
Well, and that would be my next question. Sure. So you kind of anticipated the follow-up there. How do you process them differently now compared to when they were happening to you at the time?
I had things where, a lot of people will be like, but I had stuff that after my brother died, I'd seen him as an apparition, and it made me as a kid be like, there's something after we die. But my viewpoint changed years after that. I started to realize that was probably not him. I don't think that's what's going on the ghost situation. I'm like, God, I think just reading the Bible's changed my viewpoint on that, of what is available, what can happen, and also stuff with even which is big stuff now, like with UFOs and stuff. I've had encounters to see things, and at the time, I was brought up, I think movies and stuff trained me to think a certain way. You watch Close Encounters and Star Wars and all these things, and so you're brought up as a kid believing these sci-fi fantasy that, there's aliens.
It's not of this earth.
It's not of this earth. And I think over the last couple of years, just really seeing more and more stuff, I'm like, I'm not really buying a thing. I'm not, I don't have my hair pocked up on my head going, aliens! So I hope everybody gets that reference. I can't say that dude's name. I'm going to say like Giorgio or something. But it changed, then all of a sudden you realize that that lens, that viewpoint comes through it on everything. It really changes everything. For me, I think it's for the better. I love the fact that all these things that, I didn't quite understand, I have a much greater understanding being a follower of Christ. it makes more sense too, I think, stuff. But, you talk about people now and they're preparing and they're like, we're seeing a whole lot of stuff that's coming toward disclosure. Aliens, ETs, all these things. I'm like, that's not what you think it is. You're going to have to go back and start reading your Bible and look and see what's going on with it to understand. It's a much
broaden your
bigger,
paradigm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So Chuck Missler was the gateway, led you to folks like Tom Horn and the milieu.
Yes.
What was it about what you were reading or hearing from Missler, Horn, Heiser et al. That convinced you, saying, hey, these guys are onto something.
Sure.
They're not crazy.
Right. I think early on, I think I go back to Chuck Missler, and then I had trouble finding his books in what I would consider traditional Christian bookstores. And I'd be like, why is this stuff not here? Because it's some of the coolest stuff I was ever reading. I was like, he had some really great stuff. And that became where I just started to research more. The internet was prevalent and kind of looking at more things. And then all of a sudden it was like L.A. Marzulli, and then I found out about the Nephilim in Genesis 6:4, and then his take on it with the aliens made me go, oh, this is and that was a fictional series, but it was still really good, and I think that led me into finding Tom Horn, Mike Heiser. Heiser's early stuff, and I have probably everything he's ever written. But like his fictional series with the Facade and the Portend were like, I've never read a book where I was sitting taking notes. Like I had notebooks.
Yes.
Because I was reading it. He's at the beginning saying, all of this is true, all the documents and all these things. And I was like, okay, I'm going to check all this out. So it would say something, I'd say, what? And I'd write it down. Mm-hmm. And then it was going to the internet, and that just expanded everything. Then I was like, oh, okay, man. And then I was just like, Heiser was really had me going, and I was so glad when like the Unseen Realm came out. Mm-hmm. I was like, phew. So that led me to taking his class. I'm in the second semester, and I'm telling you, man, he is. I think he's been a huge breakthrough for most people. I don't know anybody that I listen to with Skywatch that doesn't have Heiser in their stuff. He's just done a lot of things for it. So
now we credit him every time we go and speak somewhere. It's like, look, if you don't have this book, The Unseen Realm, or if you want to start, slow, read Supernatural, which is the sort of the introductory version of The Unseen Realm. Yeah. But that's the foundation. And that's the foundation for everything Sharon and I do.
That's right. Because and I'll tell you, some of your, like, that stuff set up some things for me, but then like for you and Sharon, I came across things like when you put out The Great Inception, there was so much cool stuff that I was like, you have a knowledge with finding these sources of words that all line up to mean the same thing. And it was so interesting to me that the stuff with the Titans and seeing that note that, all those words coming into it, you're like, okay, now you're opening up a whole nother territory. You're like, we're not just in the Christian bubble. We're stretching out beyond into Mesopotamia, all these areas around it, Ugaritic text. And I was like, that's stuff I didn't know anything about.
But that's where Mike's research has opened our eyes, where he points out that the apostles, hey, guess what? How does he put it? Guess what? The Hebrew prophets read things.
That's right.
They knew what their neighbors believed, and it's reflected in what they wrote. Yeah, and there are a lot of things that, unless you understand what the prophets knew,
that's right.
There are some weird things in the Bible that don't make any sense. But like Mike says, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's important. So we're just trying to build on that, and that has just made the Bible come alive. Mm-hmm. Where I love the way Sharon puts this. It's like the Lord of the Rings on steroids.
It really is. I remember the more I got into stuff, I read somebody a passage one day because they know I'm a big reader, and I like, I like Game of Thrones, and I like a lot of fantasy books and stuff like that. And I remember I read somebody this stuff, and I was like, tell me what the book is from. And I was reading this whole thing, and it was, tent peg in the head and all this stuff, and they're like, oh, what is that from? Game of Thrones? I'm like, nope, it's in the Bible. They're like, whoa, man. I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm telling you, you got to draw people. People got to be interested. Mm-hmm. I think people have gotten really satiated and just got like, and they've been brought up and everything's really safe, and they don't know this other stuff. And I'm going to tell you right now, as a believer, Genesis 6:4, that whole stuff with that, and understanding the Nephilim and the bloodlines and the giants and stuff, the giant clans and all this stuff, completely changes everything. If you don't know what that is, you need to look it up and start from there and start asking questions, because it's there now. There's so many books and information out to get that you know, to not know it now, you better get on the program.
Well, and that's really fascinating to me. And I'm not sure why I felt, and maybe this was, you know, God sort of, you know, poking me in the ribs and saying, here, look at this, because after writing the Great Inception, the idea, the concept of the Rephaim in the Bible, it's like, okay, why are they even mentioned in there? And why do they go from being these living tribes in the time of Abraham to just Og is the last one in the time of Moses? And yet we know from these other people over here, the Ugaritic people, that they're summoning them through what sounds like a necromancy ritual.
Right.
What's that about? Well, thanks to modern technology and decent computers, we can do searches for the words in the original Hebrew that aren't in our Bibles. But even when you start looking at what the scholars have known, it's only been about the last 40 years that they even began to reach a consensus that, there was a cult of the dead. And the neighbors, they did summon these things to these rituals. So it's only been in this last generation or so that this has begun to make sense to secular scholars, but it hasn't bled over into the church yet. But what I thought was really cool is talking to Dr. Judd Burton, last week's guest, and asking him, why does this matter? I mean, this is really cool stuff. I mean, especially, I can see why somebody like you, me, Sharon, people who grew up with an interest in the fascinating and the weird, you know, even Mike Heiser, who admits he's a nerd.
Oh, absolutely.
The protagonist in the facade and the portent, Brian, is, you know, that's a thinly veiled version of Mike Heiser.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
But we can see why somebody like that, who had an interest in the strange, would be really intrigued by these weird parts of the Bible. But I asked Judd, why does it matter? What is the difference? What would you say to somebody who says, this is all well and good, but why do we need to worry about this? And Judd said, well, I just 2 words, Caesarea Philippi. Because that at the base of Mount Hermon, where Jesus declared that he was the Messiah, the Son of the living God, to Simon Peter and to the apostles, right there in front of the Grotto of Pan, which was believed to be the entrance to the netherworld. At the foot of this mountain, it was believed by the Canaanites to be the threshing floor, the tabernacle of El, their creator God, which Jesus then climbed right afterward for the transfiguration. Why would Jesus even do that if it didn't matter? Why would he bother?
Right.
So, it's interesting, but more than that, it's important.
It's very important.
And I think the thing that we miss as adults, because, you know, we're busy, we're jaded. It's like, look, I've got my set beliefs. I don't want to have to stop and think.
That's right.
But if we were teaching our kids about this, that these giants were real, and they're bad, and now they're ghosts or demons.
Right.
But we have a superpower that's inside of us if we just accept Jesus Christ, where they can't hurt us. I mean, they can torment us, they can challenge us, but they can't take us.
That's right.
And this is all about who gets to be resurrected into immortal, incorruptible. We get to be resurrected into superheroes.
Right. That's right. Exactly.
If we told that story that way,
oh my gosh!
I mean, how would we go about doing that?
Yeah, I think. The last couple of books you guys have put out, Veneration was a game changer for me to understanding a lot of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's you know, you've equated some things that I won't say because I don't want somebody to flag your stuff, but you know, I know what went into it, and I saw it and was like, there's a big movement right now. There's some things with that. So and say their name and all that stuff. So that's some pretty nice stuff. But you made a good point at when we were at the conference 2 weeks ago, that if you were a 10-year-old kid and somebody had showed you that there were actual giants in the Bible
and dragons,
who wouldn't? I mean, as a kid, I loved that stuff. You know, I read The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings when I was 7 years old. I was drawn in. I'm glad that for me, knowing later as I got older that J.R. Tolkien was, you know, he was a Christian, and there was stuff with that. Same with C.S. Lewis. All those those authors had great Christian views that were put in all their material. And I think I was drawn to that without knowing completely what it was. But there's other authors these days that are doing the exact opposite, you know. The Golden Compass, you know, that stuff like that, where it's exactly the opposite. You're like, it's just harmless fantasy, and it's not.
Percy Jackson and the Olympians.
They're all pushing something that is not good.
maybe we need to find a way to tell this story with music.
That could be. I've thought about that. It's that. Hey, being out here, and everybody tends to. There's a lot of musicians and stuff. It seems like everyone. It's these serious Christians and stuff. They're all, they're musicians too. Joe Horn. He's my hero, man.
That whole family is musical.
They are so good. I watch their family, and I'm just like, it's amazing. So if you have never checked out Joe Horn, Broken for Good, go watch some videos on YouTube. His family is all of them are so talented. But my favorite is that his mom plays the drums, and she plays the drums, man. You watch the videos. I'm like, I even told her when I met her, I was like, you don't just play the drums, you play the drums solid. I mean, that's great. And
she is a metronome.
She really is.
I mean, you can hear some bands where the drummers they're working on flex time, but
Crazy,
she sets down a beat and it is solid all the way through.
No,
it is.
It's really great. So.
Yeah. Well, this is we're blessed to be here, and we're blessed that you've been here for the week, and we'll see where the Lord leads from here.
Yes.
What message would you leave? Say you're talking to your group of students right now. You're 61 students out there, and the 20 on the waiting list.
Sure.
What message do you want to leave for them that will perhaps help them prepare for life?
Well, I feel like that in the last. For a while, everything to me, music equates happiness to me. Like I love music. Now, music can be used for many different forms, but I always feel like that there's a joy with it. Even just the frequencies of sounds help heal you. Sometimes you feel really, there's good music stuff. Now, I will say this, that I just got to say this stuff like that. I love praise and worship music. There's some great stuff out there, but if you play more than 20 minutes of it, I'm going to get really upset. And I'm like, we need to get to some meat teaching here. And everybody's like, you're a musician. I'm like, I like 20 minutes, and then I want to hear the word. We got to, and I think that's some stuff I tell people all the time is that we got to get away from the concert setting with worship music. Like it's the smoke and the lights and all this stuff. And I'm like, it's cool. I'll go to a concert to get that. I want to feel the Holy Spirit, the presence. I want to feel that. And sometimes I think that kind of takes away from it.
Discerning the difference between the emotional uplift you can get with music
That's
and
right.
the actual sense of the presence of the Holy Spirit.
And that's why I think sometimes with students and stuff that at some point along the line, I try not to be like I'm proselytizing for everything, but I also want people to come to Jesus. I feel like, there's not a lot of time left. I don't want, to me, it doesn't scare me. To me, it's like, this is what's going to happen. But I also think with kids, I want them to enjoy music and they can find their way with it. But I think it's, there's so much hard stuff in the world right now, and I'm always upset. I had a young kid that I love dearly, and I did not realize that he was in some shape as stuff was going on with it, and he left the world here recently, and I think about, he just a couple months before he had messaged me and we're talking guitar talk, and he was happy with that. And I think that just there's a lot of stuff going on. The kids are just feeling the pressures of this world and everything like that. And I'm like, we've got to get it back to where kids are genuinely happy to be here. There's so much goodness going on that we have to do that. So I try to be that, even with my postings and social media, anything is that I try to be a light. I'm like, I don't have to shove things down people's throats, because a lot of people get upset about that. So I'm like, I'm just going to show you that I'm a Christian. This is what my life is like. And then people will ask, hey, how do I get that? How are you positive when there's some things your life's falling apart? Hey man, you had open heart surgery. You had stuff, you can't play shows like you used to. And I'm like, man, I'm alive. God's got me here for a purpose. I think that's a big thing that people have to find out. What is their purpose with life? God has a purpose for you. And sometimes it's not what you think it is. I thought my purpose was to be a rock star. I really did. I thought that's what it was. And I love a lot of rock music stuff that was Christian-based. I'm a huge Striper fan. I love that Christian rock scene and all this. And that music always said something to me. And the words were very solid theologically. And I try to, like I said, I think sometimes with kids now, music's changed so much that trying to find something that really, brings them closer to God is tough. it's tough, man, because the kids are hearing stuff on the radio. Their parents don't even know what the stuff is. They're like, that's on the radio. I'm like, I'm not teaching your 5-year-old WAP. I'm sorry. This is a terrible song.
Yeah.
And you have to put a point to it. And most parents will understand. You know, I try to work with that. But for me, it's just getting kids to be happy playing music. Because with that in their lives, it seeps over into their real life, school life, everything. And at some point, they'll know and see that, you know, I equate this to, you know, I'm not just happy in life. I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm an imager of God. And that's what, you know, you want that to kind of come across to people. And I hope that's what people see in the end for me.
A lot of music in the supernatural realm as we read the Scripture. The angels are singing, and I'm convinced that it's a cappella 4-part, but I'll find out if I'm right. If not, it's God's got something better.
I would be very happy with that. I love hearing some good bell tones and some harmony, man. I love that stuff. So.
Yeah. Kenny, where do people follow your work and your ministry, as it were, on the web?
You know, you can find me on Facebook. I'm easy to find. There's some great stuff on there, but just Kenny Seay, Kenny, and my last name, although it sounds like the letter C, it's actually spelled Seay. So Kenny Seay, you can find me on Facebook, and I'm going to open up to some other venues. I'm on a lot of social media platforms, but I think the old people of Facebook is a really good target market for me. The kids aren't into that, but I find that because I teach kids to be in bands and do different things, that people love that aspect of seeing these young kids playing real music, music they grew up with, and to see these kids actually, because, you know, I mean, I think people have gotten kind of like, man, I can't. So the kid, you know, and I don't really force this stuff on. These kids come to me and say, I want to learn to play this. I want to learn to play this song, and I'm all so excited. I'm like, real music with harmony and chords and playing, and it's so exciting to hear that. And so, just look. You can just search for me. You'll find me on social media.
Kenny Seay on Facebook. Kenny Seay in the house.
Yes.
It's been a joy, brother.
I've literally been in the house.
Yeah, that's right.
For a week.
It's been a joy.
Yes.
All right. Just stick around. Got a couple of final thoughts and more information about the Skywatch TV Israel tour. That's ahead as A View from the Bunker continues. Question: how do you fight something you cannot see? Davian is a third-level master of the Order, a small group of men who alone have the power to battle the most fearsome creatures in all of Saramand. For thousands of years, the Brothers of the Order have protected their world. Now, something has upset the delicate balance of power between man and dragon, and Davian must face what appears to be a dragon that cannot be seen. But Davian is losing his grip on reality, and the fate of the world rests with a stable hand, an underfed priest, and a gardener who's fallen from the stars. Iron Dragons, Book 1 of the Saramand Quest, by Derek P. Gilbert. New from Rose Avenue Fiction. Talking the walk from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker, online at VFTB.net. You can follow us online there or get us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We can subscribe you all kinds of different ways. Just check the sidebar there at VFTB.net. You follow us on social media at View from Bunker or at Derek Gilbert. That's DEREK, by the way, on Twitter. Facebook, View from the Bunker. And you also find me at Gab and MeWe at Derek P. Gilbert. Conference is coming up in 2021. New one to tell you about. It's actually not new, but it was rescheduled. And as of now, it appears as though it is going to go forward. There was some question about it earlier in the year, but as COVID rates continue to drop, it's beginning to look very promising. Still being promoted at the website. I'm talking about Future Vision 2021. That is our friends at Prophecy Watchers hosting their big Prophecy Conference at the Colorado Springs Marriott, June 17th through 20th of 2021. This will feature L.A. Marzulli, Tim Alberino, Gary Stearman, Bill Salas, Billy Crone, Ryan Pitterson, Ken Johnson, Carl Tykrib, Dr. Michael Lake, Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis, Dr. Thomas Ice, Larry Ollison, Don Perkins, Nathan Jones, Sharon and me, and probably some names to be mentioned later. So quite a variety and a big gathering at the Colorado Springs Marriott in June. We're looking forward to getting back together with our friends from Prophecy Watchers. To find out more and to sign up, log on to prophecywatchers.com, prophecywatchers.com. Now, this weekend was the Discerning Minds virtual conference from Hear the Watchmen. As I'm recording this is still going on. In fact, the live Q&A sessions, I took part in mine at noon Central Time today, but still available for 90 days. So you can find out more about that at hearthewatchmen.com. But they're already looking ahead to their next live conference. This will be the Warriors Conference from Hear the Watchmen in September at the Legacy Resort Hotel and Spa in San Diego, September 16th through 19th. That is a go. Legacy Resort Hotel and Spa, Christian-owned business. And we will be there, Sharon and me, along with Pastor Paul Begley, Jamie Walden, Colonel David Giammona, co-author of the new book, The Military Guide to Armageddon, David Heavener, Joni Stahl, John and Chelsea Jubilee, talking about health, and some great worship music from Lori and Jacob Bango, mother and son, and Justin Gambino. That all September 16th through 19th in San Diego, the Warriors Conference from Hear the Watchmen. You can sign up now online, hearthewatchmen.com. Our Skywatch TV Tour of Israel, as of now, is still on. This is scheduled for October 3rd through 18th of 2021. We plan to go with our colleagues from Skywatch TV, Allie Henson and Donna Howell, and our special guest, Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat, who join us from Tel Aviv. And we are looking forward to this. It's been rescheduled twice already. We had planned to go last October, and then it was moved to April of this year. Obviously, travel was still too much in question to commit to April, so we moved it back to October. But this, combined with the optional 3-day extension in Jordan, is guaranteed to be a tour of Israel that is just not like anything else out there. We are very blessed to have made friends with Aaron Lipkin, who runs Lipkin Tours. He and his wife are the CEO and the office manager, essentially, and they enjoy archaeology, and especially the way archaeology confirms the narrative of the Bible, the way Sharon and I do. And so our tours go places that others just will not. For one thing, they go into Judea and Samaria, which is what the world calls the West Bank. Most American tour operators don't want to go there because there's a perception that it's not safe. If you eliminate Judea and Samaria, you are already eliminating about 80% of the Bible's history. You miss Shiloh, Bethel, you miss the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron, and you miss Joshua's altar. I mean, literally, the stones from Joshua's altar, they've been reconfigured according to the way they were found. The altar was destroyed and ritually buried when it was abandoned, when the Israelites moved to Shiloh. But this is the spot, found by archaeologist Adam Zertal back around 1980 on Mount Ebal, overlooking the city of Shechem. So we will go there. We will also go to the Golan Heights, where we'll take you to Gilgal Rephaim, the Stonehenge of the Middle East, except that it's way bigger and way older than Stonehenge, and the newly recognized Serpent Mound of Bashan, just a quarter mile away, 3 times longer, 5 times higher than the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. And this serpent-shaped ridge is covered with megalithic tombs. 130 dolmens and 10 cairns, which are burial sites that are basically created by just piling a whole bunch of rocks on top of the corpse. So you've got 140 burials up there that date back more than 5,000 years, according to the archaeologist who's done some work there. And it's within line of sight of Mount Hermon. So that, and of course all the important sites like Jerusalem, the Sea of Galilee, the River Jordan. We will go to the Mount of Olives, of course, and I'm just learning some new things about the Mount of Olives. It's going into my next book, Saturn's Reign, that will make your hair stand on end. There is a reason that Jesus was betrayed on the Mount of Olives, crucified on the Mount of Olives, resurrected from the Mount of Olives, and will return on the Mount of Olives, rather than the Temple Mount. This is all about that supernatural war and the entities who rebelled back in the day. So we'll have an opportunity to talk about that as we look down on the Temple Mount from the Mount of Olives. We'll visit the Garden of Gethsemane, and then Zev will show us based on his research, the actual historical locations of the crucifixion and the burial tomb, the place of resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is especially relevant at this season, or at least should be top of mind. Resurrection Sunday ought to be the most important holiday in the Christian calendar in the annual year. So we will see all of that, and then the 3-day extension over to Jordan to go to Mount Nebo, where Moses got his only look at the Holy Land. We'll explain why that was especially significant, why God called it this mountain of the Avarim, mountain of the travelers, and why that is prophetically significant as well. Wadi Rum, which is the Red Desert. You find out why Edom was called Edom, and then Petra, which is not just a spectacular place to visit because of the architecture of the ancient Nabateans, but also because of the spiritual significance of Petra, both historically and prophetically. All of that and more. There's a complete breakdown of costs and sample itineraries online at skywatchinisrael.com. That's all one word, skywatchinisrael.com. And we hope you can join us in the Holy Land come this October. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to listen this week. We appreciate you leaving us a review if you get a spare minute. Spreaker, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever else you find us, which is, of course, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Our announcer is DC Good, and A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Next week, we talk to Dr. Douglas Hamp about his forthcoming book, and we'll explain why, even though it's not yet published, I'm already citing it. He's got footnotes in my forthcoming book. That will be next week on A View from the Bunker. Until then, remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.